Hello, welcome to Ask the Manager. I don't have a guest with us today because I have too many questions, so I'm being selfish, to be honest. There's 54 articles for town meeting.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's telling in itself. So we need to plan on being there for at least a couple of nights, if not more.
Yes, definitely.
So I have so many. Let me just go down the list here. Beal Commons, is that still scheduled for June 3rd to go to trial?
It is, yeah. So there's some pre-trial proceedings that are going on right now. The most recent one was this past Friday, and we're continued towards that trial date of June 3rd.
Okay. And why don't you just tell us a little bit about the meeting that happened Thursday night regarding the MBTA?
Sure. So the Select Board held a special meeting on Thursday night. It was May 2nd, and they kind of took a pause and considered where we were in the MBTA development process as we headed into town meeting. And they voted to not recommend the adoption of the article at this time. And that allows us the opportunity to go through the pre-adoption process with the state and resume a public engagement process after we're through that. And it'll just pretty much extend the opportunity for public engagement on that topic, and it will eliminate any uncertainty with regards to any comments that we may receive from the state, because we'll have those in hand. So we had started the process on the mixed use aspect and review by the state, but the overall language for the bylaw itself, which was inherent in the mixed use, but we'll get that pre-adoption feedback from the state. It's not a guarantee, but it's an opportunity for feedback.
So given the fact that this is happening, do you believe that there's no way of avoiding the town or the town being excused from being a part of this MBTA law?
I don't think that there's a way, unless there's legislative intervention in the meantime. From my review of this matter and what the state already controls when it comes to local zoning, I think this is well within their scope and purview. I don't feel like it's really extremely different than anything else that they already control when it comes to zoning. It's different, there's no doubt about it. It's not the same as 40B. It's not the same as some other exclusions that they've carved out, but there's a whole chapter of the general laws, chapter 40A, that's called the Zoning Act. And there's 16 or 19 different sections in that already where the state controls the zoning and actually really defines the processes that we have to use when it comes to zoning at the local level.
So what was the spirit of this law or enactment when the Baker administration, as I understand it, put it into play? What was the spirit of it? What was the real reason for it? Because for us in Shrewsbury, we're like, what do we have to do with this? We don't even feel like we're a part of the train process whatsoever. Not to mention, we don't have good train service in this area. If I wanted to go to Boston, I'd be afraid to get on the train for fear that there's no return trip. Where in a lot of places, it's a continuum. Right. So the bus comes every so many minutes, the train comes every so many minutes. For us, it's the train comes once a day. Nope, not going to take you back. So you take the train to Boston. So we're not serviced by that train, no matter how people want to believe that we are. We're truly not serviced by that. Because if we were, all of us would be jumping on the train to go in, and we don't.
Yeah. So, I mean, This is my understanding. I never had an in-depth conversation with anyone in the administration when this was passed. So I have three things I really say to that. So the laws and the regulations have evolved since the two paragraphs were put into an economic bond bill and was passed. So this wasn't a piece of standalone legislation. It was an aspect of a general funding package that occurred in 2022. So then from there, regulations have been developed by various state agencies to really bring this to fruition and codified into law. I see it as an attempt to increase the supply of housing across the Commonwealth.
Period.
There's a little bit of, because it's MBTA and it's about communities that are along the rail line or adjacent to the rail line, there's a hint of smart growth to it, right? Like develop housing in proximity to commuter rail to reduce vehicular traffic congestion, provide more customers to the MBTA, hopefully bring more funding, and really allow this to help catalyze the MBTA and provide more services, right? So keeping cars off, providing more housing, keeping cars off the road, and developing access into Boston through a commuter rail service. I think all of those can be somewhat effective. None of them are going to solve any of the problems, whether it's the problem of the MBTA and its reliability, the desirability of service from central Massachusetts, or really the housing crisis, if you want to call it that. Like, there's just not, that takes the market and a lot of things that come to play to really solve those big problems.
Does the rail touch Shrewsbury's border at all?
It does not.
It does not.
Yeah.
But yet we're required to.
Yeah, because we're adjacent to 3 communities that have physical stops: Westboro, Grafton, and Worcester.
So wouldn't it make sense to provide good service before you start pounding on the communities to pay up for something that you can't even believe in, because it's almost like it doesn't exist because we're not affected by it?
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
I know it's my opinion, but I think that's probably a lot of what people feel for frustration over this. We don't even identify with the MBTA at this point. It would be nice if we could. So my question would be to the state, provide the service before you have expectation of us. And the financial impact of what they will impose on a town that's just an adjacent community, there's a financial impact to the town. That this, we may get $5 million from the state at this point in grants or whatever, but there's still, it's how much of that's going to like almost disappear because we're paying on the other end. I know you don't have the answers, but I think it's a tough one for people to buy.
I mean, we did some analysis that I presented at the Finance Committee a couple weeks ago. I think if you look at an example using what we know has occurred in the community, the number of children per apartment dwelling unit in the recent apartment developments within the community, the value on a per unit basis of the properties that are developed and how much taxes that's going to bring, it's at minimum a net neutral, somewhat net positive, and I don't have every possible contingency. It's really hard to analyze the downstream effect on roadway conditions, right? Like, you can estimate traffic, but how much sooner will a roadway need to be resurfaced if you add X number of additional units within a particular region? Like, that's really hard to predict traffic patterns and things like that. So there's some other incremental costs, but when I looked at public safety services and education services, which are our 2 most elastic costs when it comes to increase in number of residents, it was a net neutral or net positive as far as receiving additional tax revenue over what those expenses would be. And I tried to provide 2 different scenarios, one based upon the highest number of children per unit within a particular development, which is the Autobahn, and the 0.44 units there. And then our most recent developments, Lakeway and Edgemere, there's less than 1/10 of a child per unit within over those 500 total units that were developed. So it's not having, right now, it could change, right? It's not having a significant impact on our total number of children within the school system.
So that's good to know. But now, right across from Liberty Church on Route 20, there's an awful lot of construction going on, and that appears to be apartments.
It is. Yep.
And so that coupled with Lakeway, coupled with the Edgemere project, coupled with Emerald Green,
Right. Yeah.
Yep. What am I forgetting as far as new construction? I mean, one may not seem, and then all of a sudden now we have what? I'm going to exaggerate. Now we have 6, maybe it's 8. So that one may only give us a few kids, but yet overall, the students from all of these. So I don't know how you control that. I don't know how you can be futuristic with that, but I think it's frustrating for a town administrator to have to look at that and think, where are all these apartments coming from, and what are we gonna do?
Right.
And which brings me to the high school expansion. They moved into the high school more than 20 years ago now, and they were already at capacity. So now they're way over capacity, and the school committee and the select board voted to go forward with the expansion project, or the study of the
Correct.
expansion
Yep.
project,
Yep.
which always takes time. And I think that's something that probably needs to be done sooner rather than later, but yet the original high school being built took us 10 years to convince town residents that it was something that was necessary, not just something that we wished for. It was something that was necessary. So we already know it's necessary, and hopefully, you know, these apartment projects don't negatively impact the school system before they can make these accommodations, and how it affects all the residents that are here already. I think it's there's no polite way of saying it. It's frustrating as someone who's lived in town all these years to hear someone stand up at a public meeting and say, I moved to Shrewsbury 5 years ago, I moved to Shrewsbury 10 years ago from such and such a town because of these reasons. Well, yeah, and that's why the people behind you want to come in too. We know it's a good town. And so for those people to be the most vocal on stop those people from coming in, it's like, how do you can't do that.
Yeah.
It is a great place to live. So, and nothing's changed with that. It still is. And when you compare Shrewsbury to other towns, it's a great place to live. So I don't fault them for feeling that way, but you know, how do you turn around and tell the person behind you they can't come in? You just came in.
Yeah, who gets to close the door behind them? That's the question. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I chuckle over that. And while I'm being a little bit of a brat, I'll also say that I'm getting frustrated hearing one of the members of the finance committee say, look, there's nobody in the audience. And I'm thinking, no, because we're sitting at home so we can yell at the TV. No, but people are watching that. People are watching those meetings. They don't have to be physically sitting in the room to be paying attention to the decisions that have to be made by any of the committees. The luxury we have is a great cable system and a great public access where we can have the luxury of sitting at home and eating our popcorn and watching that meeting.
Sure.
And if we didn't want to sit at home and watch that meeting, we'd want to be a member of the committee, okay? I've done my time. I love sitting at home watching the meeting and being able to pick and choose, you know, at what time I have to watch it. And which I also have to say, it's really difficult when your meetings go past even 9:30 at night. Anything past that for someone who's gone to work all day is really difficult. But you have so much happening. I don't know what the easy answer is for that either. But and now I'm rambling, but those are my thoughts. It's like just because we're not sitting in the room doesn't mean we're not paying attention. And I firmly believe and agree with that member that people need to come to town meeting prepared, and they need to do their homework, because a lot of the questions at town meeting can be questions that it's like, didn't you see that? They've said that in 7 different meetings. They've been talking about this for months and months and months. Yeah. And so as a town meeting member, they do have the responsibility to do their homework. Right. Whichever way, whether they're sitting in the room or watching it on TV, they really do need to do their homework. And maybe for a few minutes, I'll get off my soapbox and go to another question. So the city of Worcester had another spill. Was it February or March? The end of February, and had one almost 2 years ago. And the Lake Quinsigamond Commission talks about reviewing the issue and thinking maybe they need to have fines, heavy fines. I think they need to think bigger than that, because this isn't going to go away. There's going to be more spills. It's going to either come from Worcester or Shrewsbury, because that's we're the ones that abut the lake in our aquifer. So what can be done, which I believe needs to be with state assistance, to help us protect that lake better than we can do just by fining someone? What can be done? There's got to be something.
Yeah, we've talked about this, I think, before on the show.
Yes.
The geography lends itself to run infrastructure like a sewer system along bodies of water because it's normally the lowest point right within the community. So everything flows towards a water body, and then underground, like that's how we managed our sewer system, right? Because they're mostly gravity based. Sure, we have a lot of pump stations, but the majority of the segments of the sewer system are gravity based. So getting them towards a water body worked historically. It's I think two specific things. It's investing in the pump stations in and of themselves to make sure that they do shut off when something goes wrong, and then trying to make sure that the redundancies or the recapture ability outside of the standard system, because it's located in such an environmentally sensitive area, are more robust than they are, right? So I agree with you. Something's always going to fail and the systems are going to fail. So what is the backup to the backup system that we can have because it's near Lake Quinsigamond, right? We have plenty of other pump stations throughout the community. We don't ever want any of them to have an overflow, but if they do, they don't have the environmental consequences of it being next to one of our most cherished, parts of the environment and natural environment, in the area. So that's really what I see. I think if money wasn't an issue, it'd be relocating those pump stations because we have the ability to convey sewer much more easily than was done nearly 100 years ago when this infrastructure was being put in place. But that's extremely not only costly, but damaging, expensive to surrounding property owners, right? The areas are so much more developed. The areas around the lake, even the other side of the road away from the lake, have higher property values, and we'd have to take land and things like that to make these things happen. So making sure that immediate infrastructure is as modern as possible with the safety features, and then the redundancies to capture any overflow is two things that come to my mind.
So the property's only going to go up?
Correct.
So sooner rather than later. But who should lead that charge? Because it really should be more of a state-run event.
I think the state
supported.
Yeah, state can do a lot to support those improvements, and working together with all communities that have infrastructure around the lake is probably the best approach, right? I mean, the lake divides us for sewer infrastructure because there's no way to get around it. So we have our own individual challenges, but the state could do an awful lot to help through grants and lower no interest loans. And we know there's a lot of money at the federal level for the infrastructure.
My point is, there's so many things that are happening now where we're throwing money to this project and that project and that project. And there are little projects, and it's nice that they're being done. But it's like we need to look at what are the biggest things that are really very expensive, but something that needs to be worked on starting today, not 10, 15 years from now, because the problem won't go away. And, it's a rotten situation. I'm trying to be nice. So anyways, do we have a DPW director yet?
No, we're still in the search process,
Okay.
going through various rounds of interviews, things like that.
And Meals on Wheels says that they need more volunteers. Do you know if they've gotten more volunteers or?
No, I think it's an ongoing
yeah.
issue. Not only is the population that we serve growing, but the people that are interested in providing those services is declining. So it's definitely still an ask that we have out there. So if you're interested in volunteering for that type of program, we do provide some offsets to the costs if you're worried about driving your own vehicle and those expenses. So we do help with that. But we are looking for volunteers there.
And that's such an important program.
Yes.
And it's to think that was run by one person. One person delivered and one person handled all of it at one time. And that was the beginning of it. And then it evolved from there. And it's pretty amazing that I remember the person who started it back then. I mean, it really wasn't that long ago. It was only maybe more than 30 years ago, but it's not really in the time frame that long when you think about more mobility, more families being all over the country, all over the world, needing help for their elder who, happens to live in Shrewsbury.
Sure.
So hopefully people will find it in their hearts to be able to volunteer in some way. Traffic issues. I'm seeing more police around on patrol, looking like they're on traffic duty. Hopefully that's going to stop the people going through red lights and stop signs and all that we always talk about. And everybody's in a hurry, you know, to get from here to there and frustrated with the traffic. But if we don't have control of that, it's only going to get worse. So the presence of the police, I think, is really a good deterrent. Which brings me to Maple Ave. I'm told that along Maple Ave, some streets have stop signs. Some streets have what's called a stop line, which I didn't even know there was a thing. Why don't they all have stop signs?
There has to be a specific amount of traffic conditions that warrants a stop sign for being placed at an intersection. And I know that kind of seems counterintuitive, but you know, motorists have to have an understanding when they're approaching a traffic crossing, and you know,
common sense.
Yeah, common sense, and always slow down and yield, you know, to the environment that they're in right then. But literally, there has to be a certain number of cars that approach an intersection or an entrance to another roadway from a particular direction to actually warrant a stop sign. People probably yell at me for this one. There is a cost factor associated with that as well, right? If we took every intersection in Shrewsbury on every side street and placed a stop sign there, I mean, there'd be a significant amount of money not only now to get those first stop signs in, but the replacement costs and management of them in the future. So it is a really defined process in the Uniform Traffic Control, Safety Control. We follow that because if we don't follow that and there is an accident, then that increases the liability to the town. So if a stop sign was not properly installed or wasn't warranted and we install it, then we broaden our liability.
So you follow a rule book in order to...
Yeah, the Uniform Traffic Control Book, yes.
There you go.
Yep.
And do you study that one at night when you get home?
Yeah, no.
I already jumped through that. Okay, dumping. I know on Bow Street, was it, that in Shrewsbury, the main culprit was caught?
Yes.
And had to clean up and so forth. Do you notice that there's illegal dumping in certain areas like Old Mill Road near the high tension wires? It's like, why do people, and why do they litter? Why do they have to dump there? I mean, we have services in place.
Yeah, we definitely do have our hot spots for dumping. I can tell you when it comes to Bow Street, we've reached 7 or 8 convictions in court at this point, and all of them came with both some type of cleanup requirements and fines. So we are moving on to other areas as fair warning to folks, you know, and we patrol that through camera systems and things that are installed within the general, you know, rights of way. So probably not very many litterers. Ask the manager, but this is everyone's fair warning that we are pursuing other areas of the community. It's very frustrating. The fines don't bring us, you know, any significant windfall. We really just want to stop the community from looking damaged and unkept.
Now, I imagine the sidewalk on Maple Ave, which is a state sidewalk, right? I imagine the state has worse sidewalks than the one that I'm going to talk about. But is there do we have to put in a request to ask the state to upgrade the sidewalk on Maple Ave?
I mean, normally we're better off just doing it ourselves and asking them a permit. You know, that's what we did, for instance.
In front of the town hall?
Yeah, town hall and police station. As you know, being on the building committee, we just went to the committee and said, hey, we got 2 options. We can do it ourselves. We can ask the state. You know, we always pull a permit through a state process to make sure that they know we're working within their infrastructure, but that's normally the best approach to take. So getting it put out there and on the list and repaired is normally easier for us to do.
Another one, the late bus that the students came from, out of the budget they had extra money, and I don't remember where it was from, but it was $175,000. That $175,000 services, I think it was 230 students that use this bus. It's available for people, I think, high school students that stay after school and then they can get home. And the service is there because it encourages them to stay to do what they need to do, but the parents may not be home from work yet or whatever. But what I've been noticing, being a retired person, watching everything, like, parents sit at the bus stop with their cars, waiting to pick their kids up. That get off the late bus. Why don't they just go pick them up at school? Take that late bus money, $175,000, put it into the transportation part of the budget, and help defray the cost of what it is for people. I mean, they were only helping 230 kids where they could be helping I mean, $175,000 doesn't go far when it comes to transportation expenses, but that just goes into my frustration of hating that they have to pay a transportation fee. And I think a lot of the traffic we see around town when school is starting or getting out is parents that drive their kids to school and pick them up because they're not going to pay that money, or they have multiple kids, and I realize there's a ceiling, but they have multiple kids that becomes a crazy expense, and so they choose to pick them up. So therefore, it puts more traffic on our road. So it's kind of like counterproductive in some ways. But okay, off my soapbox. Let's see. I'll go past that one. Improved trash bags.
How about that?
So I know we've talked about it before, but people are just learning that there's going to be improved trash bags. And there was a frustration. You heard them, and you fixed it. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, so right now we're piloting two different aspects in a new bag. One, it's thicker, right? So there's still going to be a weight restriction that is going to be managed by the hauler, right? 20-pound limit to the bag. So we've moved away from a bag kind of being constructed to fail over a certain weight, and said, look, we need to improve the quality of the bags. We'll manage the weight by the hauler, right? They have good ways to do that, to test it if a bag's really heavy.
Don't check it at my house.
It wouldn't be picked up. But then the other part that we're piloting right now is the biggest point of failure and feedback that we receive is the drawstring breaks.
Right.
And it separates from the top of the bag where they weld it together. So we have wave top bags, which, are to be used to tie a knot in the top of the bag. So, when it's laid out, it looks like a wave, it goes up and down, but that gives you 4 taller aspects to tie together. So, anyone can come to the town hall manager's office or DPW and pick up one free one, and then you have to complete a survey and send it back in, because we're looking for people's feedback. So that gives 1,000 points of feedback. People like it. We want folks of all ages and hand dexterity to see if they can tie the bag closed, or do we need to rethink some other aspect of the drawstring. More than likely, for a while, we would have drawstring bags and wave top bags, maybe forever, but we're really looking for everyone's feedback on these different changes.
So when do they start coming in to get their free bag?
It wouldn't be probably until we do our next significant order, which would be around the first quarter of the new fiscal years, because we put in we have a multi-year contract, but do 1 or 2 big orders a year.
So it'd be July?
Yeah, yep.
And you'll advertise that more as you get closer, I'm sure.
Absolutely, yep.
Which, I have to say, I can't believe how many ways your office provides information to us. And when I say your office, it's the people that work for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's not just from TV programs or your podcast, but we're now receiving information, for example, as town meeting members, we receive information. You have the website, and there's good things on the website, and there's things I get frustrated with. But overall, I think you do a really good job of giving us the information. We just have to take it.
Yep.
And next year, even though you've made all these great improvements, next year you'll still have someone stand up and say, nobody told me that. How come I didn't know? So some of it's on us. So I think that you're doing a good job as far as providing the information, but everybody needs to be proactive, from the other end.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, the model that we're using is daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly information that we get out. And then there's some nuances, right? Like we're sending a bi-weekly email out or a weekly email out to town meeting members specifically. So we have some, project-based things or group-based things that we're communicating with. But the daily stuff is more emergency need-based or, something like that. But we're mindful that we don't want to oversaturate, but we are trying to provide regular, reliable communications from across the departments and the spectrum of things that we do. So that's the model that we're trying to follow.
And we need to do our part on the other side.
Read.
Yes. Casella starts July 1st.
That's right.
And Casella is the new trash company. They're not new, they've been around. And it'll be single stream recycling, which there'll be plenty of education coming out when it's time. If you tell us now, you'll only confuse us. So you're better off waiting till it gets closer to the time. And you'll have various ways of getting that information to town residents.
That's right. Yeah, we've done a couple sessions for the programs generally, but we will be providing much more detailed information as we get closer to July 1. We do think, right, we're providing carts. That's the biggest change, and that's where your recyclable materials are going, and they're 64-gallon containers. And those are going to be picked up weekly. So we know people have a little bit of recycling FOMO or something, like I'm going to have too much recycling, but 64 gallons of recycling every single week is a significant volume of recycling, especially if you're breaking down your materials as you're supposed to when it comes to cardboard boxes. Most communities use 96-gallon containers, so much larger, but they're picked up every 2 weeks. So 96 gallons every 2 weeks. We're picking up 128 gallons every 2 weeks, right? So your volume is bigger but the individual container is smaller. So, yeah.
And do we have an EMS contract?
We do. Yep.
And how long will that contract be in effect?
So it's a 5-year contract that we entered into with UMass again for Worcester Emergency Medical Services. And a couple of differences. First, a negative difference is we will start paying a little bit for the service. It's $87,000 a year for that 5-year period. And we are starting to partner with them to establish our own ambulance services here in Shrewsbury to supplement what they do. More than likely that will be a basic life support ambulance. There's 2 types of ambulances, at least as I understand it, a basic life support and an advanced life support. Shrewsbury's proximity to the hospital means that the vast majority of the calls can all be handled by BLS, right? It'd have to be a significant trauma event to really need advanced life support for the relatively shorter amount of transport. So we think keeping UMass in place with that, always having access to those paramedics, and starting to develop our own system will, as they say in the industry, we'll add a truck to the area, right? So that'll be a +1, where if we just took over the service from UMass, it would not be a +1. UMass would go away and Shrewsbury would start. So we think this partnership, which UMass was incredibly accepting of and interested in building with us, is the best way to go.
And why do they need $87,000 from the town if they collect from our insurance company anyhow?
The most direct way that we looked at that is that essentially covers the cost of the annual financing of an ambulance over 5 years. So it's a capital investment, is how we tied it together after our series of negotiations, and that's how we settled on that number.
is it called Maple AV Pac yet?
Yeah.
Okay, so Maple AV Pac had an awful lot of construction since last fall,
Right.
and it's looking nice. How is it complete? And what was done?
It's 95% complete. So it was, we ran water and sewer infrastructure into the site. We repaved the access roadways and the parking areas, and we added stormwater control measures and detention basins associated with that impervious surface. So that was the work that was done there.
Is there a plan to put in flushing toilets up there?
We have the ability to do that now.
Now.
Yeah, I'm
Right.
saying we don't have a plan to actually construct that. You know, we don't have the money in place to do it, but we have the ability to do it now.
But there is a committee.
Yes.
So-
Yep.
I think that'd be a real plus to be able to give them flushing toilets, given my experience going from field to field.
Yeah.
I think that's helpful for everyone.
Yep.
It looks nice. How do you keep the people off the path that needs seating? Or you just hope?
Yeah, well, I mean, we won't be lining that field for official use, and we're doing our best to keep folks off of it until.
And so all the teams had to just work
Yeah.
around the.
Yeah, I mean, the project got delayed somewhat, like everything seems to these days, and I want to thank the public schools. At the high school, they dedicated a number of fields for what would have otherwise gone on at Maple Avenue, and they're incredibly flexible with us because we haven't used those fields at all this spring. And as you know, it'd normally be full of soccer kids and a whole bunch of other things going on there. So we're just keeping folks off of it until we can get it fully established. The areas that we can get folks back on now that the paving and everything's pretty much done, we'll do that. But it may not be till next spring until we can use the whole site.
I thought it was a really good idea the way they put the rocks to stop the cars from pulling onto the grass. Are they going to do something like that on the road closest to Town Hall? One side has a fence and the other side doesn't?
Yeah, we're actually looking to install some wooden guardrails on that side to
Like
keep
on
traffic.
one side, match
Yes,
on the other?
correct.
Because that'd be really good. And then hopefully then they'd use the parking
lot.
that we
Yeah.
built there for them. The police station had an issue with cars were pulling in there on certain events. They're trying to park in the back of the police station. There's a gate. Isn't there a gate that closes
There is a
there?
gate that closes.
Why don't
there.
they use that?
That's a great question.
Oh,
I normally see it open.
It's always open.
Yeah.
And I think it would be nice that if they closed it for security and to keep those who, think that it's okay to park there.
Right.
It would save them from having to watch that.
Right.
And then the police station barriers were put in place out front.
Those 2 new barriers were
Yeah.
put in place.
How
out
do they
front.
look?
Yeah.
I haven't driven through to give my own opinion, but
Yeah, one of them was dropped prior to being installed, so that'll have to be replaced. But that's okay, things happen, and they'll be responsive to that. I think they look fine. They blend in really well, right? And
you're
that's kinda
satisfied? Yeah, that's what we
That's kind
wanted.
of what we wanted.
right. And it was thanks to you telling us those didn't look good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So
that's
then we did some more
almost all
drainage
done.
work. I don't know.
And
if
the
that's on the
drainage
list.
work, I was all set to prank you with something, but I'll have to wait and see if the drainage is successful, because once I had the bright idea, it dried out and we haven't had a little pond up there since.
Yeah. So we augmented the drainage of that front park area so it will drain back into the detention basin. And I'll have to say, if anyone also did this and judged without really getting out, like if you drive down Maple Avenue, if you're in the town hall parking lot, even I said, why is the drain inlet there? That doesn't look like the lowest spot. If you walk to where that drain is, it's the lowest spot. So hopefully it's successful, and there may be water that ponds there for a short amount of time, but it's not there for 2 or 3 days after a major rain event. And,
So
just
hopefully
improves it.
that's a major improvement, because it wouldn't be just that the ponding was there. It's the long-term effect of that happening in an area where it's been,
Yeah.
groomed.
Right.
So What's the timeline for the cable fiber optic project to be done? Is it on schedule?
It's on schedule, yeah. I think there's about 18 months to 24 months remaining until the whole town is actually serviced by fiber.
Is that longer than what they thought?
No, it's a 3-phase cycle, and I think 24-ish months for every cycle. So, yeah, It's a big project, right? We're doing basically up to 15,000 service drops at all the locations throughout the community. So it's a big project.
What's happening with the senior center space?
As far as
is there a plan?
No, I mean, no renovation plans or anything right now. We are able to provide the vast majority of programming that's required, and I think even when we looked at that building preliminarily, it was more of a renovation and
Right, it was
cleanup than an expansion of the building. So they added a nice patio if you haven't been out there.
It's beautiful.
Lately, and
I
good,
saw it when we did the med drop off.
Yeah.
I thought it looked nice.
Yeah.
I just wondered, as the number of seniors grows, if that's going to be an issue creeping up on us before you have a chance to even address it. Not that you haven't been trying to address every other expansion that needs to take place. But what's the status of our water? I'm tired of people thinking Shrewsbury water is bad.
Yeah.
Because Shrewsbury water is not bad.
No.
So.
Yeah, I mean, there's one major initiative on the horizon, which is the removal of PFAS, right? Which is the new contaminant that the EPA just put final rules and regulations in place within the last 30 days. We're well ahead of the curve on that. We notified the community in 2019 of our PFAS levels, and since that time, we haven't stopped working on it. And just like nearly every other city and town in Massachusetts, we will have to install a treatment plant for that, and we have already been accepted into the state revolving fund program and allocated $18.5 million to build that. So it is a loan, but it is a 2% interest loan, which is really cheap, especially with the market these days. And that work is, we're almost completely designed, and we will be moving forward to construction, maybe about a year from now. And it is a broader spectrum treatment method, so hopefully if there's other contaminants in the future that, people have created that we need to remove from the water.
So PFAS is human created.
100%, yep.
So why isn't it that the federal government ban the products that contain PFAS until they replace it with something that's safe? Because wouldn't that be less expensive than allowing all these manufacturers to produce all these products and then the communities have to pay to get it out to keep us safe?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with the banning of the creation of them, if there's any progress towards that. I know that we are joining a class action lawsuit against two of the largest manufacturers of PFAS, and there's likely a settlement agreement that will be reached and we'll receive some money from that. I can't tell you whether it's $50 or $10 million.
$50 million.
Yeah, it's probably closer to $3 to $4 million, but
that affects
something.
our health.
It does. Yep.
It's human created. It affects our health. It comes from manufacturers, but yet we're spending millions to fix it, which we have to do.
Right.
Because it's a, what do you call it, a never-ending chemical?
Forever
chemical.
Yep.
So if it's a forever chemical, it's here. So we have to do something with what's here.
Yeah.
And maybe the federal government's doing something about it and we just don't know. But I would think that start at the root of the problem would be the least expensive for everyone, and at least expensive in just health safety.
Yeah.
Okay, I think for 2 minutes. No, I've got another one. Here we go. Cemetery plans. You have a cemetery committee?
Yep. The Parks and Cemetery Committee.
Yes.
Yep.
And back in December, there was a presentation at the Conservation Commission meeting. And it was talking about it being a green-leaning cemetery. It was, I'm quoting the man that did the presentation. Create a park-like atmosphere while we bury remains. He was disrespectful. He was crass. Acts as a cemetery but doubles as a park. A cemetery is a sacred place. Here we are keeping sacred Indian bones safe, which we should do and be respectful about it, but yet we're going to make ours a playground where we're going to be buried. And he also talked about 50 years from now, people aren't going to be buried, they're just going to be cremated. Like, how does he know? Does he have a crystal ball? I found him to be very disrespectful to the ethics of many people, and obviously my ethics, that people need to be not only buried respectfully, whichever way they choose, but that you don't want people galloping over these cemeteries. That it's a cemetery. You want to have a park, you have a park. You want to have a cemetery, treat it like a sacred place. And I don't believe that that is this person's intention. And I didn't catch his name, but he was the man in charge giving the presentation. And I just found him to be really disrespectful of people's values.
So, and I'm not going to speak for him. He was likely our designer of it.
Yes,
but
he was.
I think what he's trying to convey is that it's not going to be, we're not going to clear cut the whole area like was done in the lower sections of Mountain View, and it'd be absent of trees, and it'd be Arlington National Cemetery where there's perfectly uniform rows and that meet in grids. It's going to be a lot more treed and a lot less regimented on a grid system when we lay out the graves.
It sounds like a great idea. Have you ever gone into one of the older cemeteries and see those trees with those giant roots uprooting the graves around the tree? So people that want to be buried by a tree really want to be far away from that tree because the roots in 50, 60 years come up and...
Yeah, so, and I know there won't be conventional full body coffin burials with vaults next in the treed areas, right? Those will be reserved more for niches and buried cremated remains and things like that. Yeah.
And the other thing, you have to be careful. Everybody says, oh, you should have flat stones. Then they sink into the ground and nobody raises them up, and so they disappear. So they just need to be really considerate of what other people's values are as they have their own. Like, I just think it's important, and I don't have full confidence in after listening to his presentation. Okay, let's see if I can get off my soapbox yet. Let's go on the next page. Okay, so the farmer Christmas tree shop is going to be a trampoline park?
So one of the spaces where the appliance store was, which is 40,000 square feet, is they've pulled permits to turn it into a trampoline park. The overall purchaser of the whole property has a number of trampoline parks across the Northeast. So this isn't a surprise that they would be wanting to locate a trampoline business with inside one of those spaces there. So it'll be interesting to see how they approach the property. We've been, trying to engage with them, the owner, to see if they're master planning the site or not, but we haven't been successful at this point.
Okay, and I'm going to say this wrong. Is it FISIC or FISIC? FISIC? The instrument?
Physique. Yep.
Physique.
Yep.
Physique.
Yep.
Their new headquarters, worldwide, is in Shrewsbury.
Yeah, 440 Hartford Turnpike.
And just update us on that.
Yeah, so that is a 135,000 square foot facility. It is being developed by GFI Partners, and they came in and originally spec'd it out as a warehouse space, very similar to what they're doing at the Clinton Street project. But we had been working with PI or Physique Instrumente and trying to find space for them within Shrewsbury, and they were first looking at Centec North, and that didn't work out. And then we connected them with GFI, and it's going to be clean, high-tech manufacturing. So PI does precision manufacturing, and they develop tools and features. I'm going to butcher this, but everyone will just have to clean it up afterwards. That place things on a high precision basis. So think of a microchip inside of your Apple Watch, right? That's got to go within the right tiny spot to make everything work. So they develop machinery that does that. So that's what would be manufactured there. They have a couple of facilities within the region, and they're all going to be consolidated here in Shrewsbury.
Which is huge for
Yeah.
Shrewsbury.
Over 100 jobs, obviously the high-tech manufacturing, clean manufacturing side of things, so higher pay, more room for employee growth and things like that. We're really excited to have them locate here in Shrewsbury. And, right, it's a good story with being able to work with partners in the private sector to convey to them, like GFI, we understand that, you know, you're going to build a building here. We want the best use out of it. We did the same thing with Northbridge Partners at Centec North. Yes, they built 2 buildings on spec there, 300,000 square feet. We kept telling them and asking them, and they've worked with us and understood us. We don't want this just to be another warehouse facility. We want this to be the best and the highest use. And all those facilities are being occupied, or 90% of the space up there will be occupied by biomedical industry occupants. So we're excited about that as well. So good stories.
So how does GFI respond to that?
Respond to?
Wanting the highest possible use.
Well, thus far they've been really receptive to that, and talking with us about the possibilities and how they are putting their site plans together, letting us know that when they're going through the planning board process, they're going through it as if it will be that highest traffic use, but knowing that that's the best way to do it, because then all potential outcomes will be satisfied, and they won't have to go back and say, you know, we thought it was going to be a high-tech manufacturer that was only going to produce 100 trips per day, and now it's going to be a warehouse facility that produces 1,000 trips a day. They're going, let's permit it as a warehouse space, and then let's work with the town to fill it for something that's less intense and higher value, in my opinion.
And is their integrity such that you can trust that they're actually genuinely going to aim for that?
Yes.
Because I think that's important for the people that have all these concerns to know. We don't know what it's going to be, but this is the message you're sending. Yeah,
the best outcome, I mean, 440 Hartford Turnpike is a prime example of that, right? This isn't about me making the phone call, but whenever I realized Physique Instrumente was not going to be able to go into Centec North, I picked up the phone and called GFI and said, I have a tenant that I really want you to consider. It's not going to fit in your space as you currently permitted it, but I think if you work with them, they can be an excellent partner to you and to us. And within, I would say 8 weeks at the most, I got a phone call back and said they're coming. So they've worked wonderfully with us. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Great. So, and that's on the board for town meeting?
Yes. Yep.
And with all the concerns, I found listening to it, even though I thought I had a solid perception of what the intent of this project is, the concerns made it very confusing. So if I were just sitting down and watching it for the first time, listening to those concerns, you could be alarmed and think, oh my God, what are they going to do to all the land around there? And I think somehow, before town meeting, which is coming soon, town meeting members, especially right now, need to have the confidence of where the town is headed with this project and how you're working with them.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I want to say about that. We have the regulatory framework in place to ensure that our aquifer is protected, right? If part of me wants to say, and so I'll just say it, right? If we can't be trusted to manage our own water supply, with which the occupation and residency of the entire community relies upon, then we can't be trusted at all, right? Like we have not thought about that. We are working through this. The design of the stormwater system not only is nearly 5 times the capacity requirements, the water coming out of that system versus what is coming out of that system right now and going into Newton Pond on a whole slew of measures, but, one that comes to mind is phosphorus. It's going into Newton Pond right now at about 20 parts per trillion, and it'll be going in at 6 because they're going to mechanically treat the water. If the overlay district in and of itself prohibits certain types of chemicals and liquids and materials and hazardous materials from being on the site at all. It's prohibited. And no matter what the end user is, they're going to have to comply with that, and we will have oversight over that. And the system that's being put in place, if there was an accident, like a fuel tank was ruptured, we can turn the drainage system and close it to sequester that, harmful material, diesel fuel in it, and then suck it back out, right? Like those systems have fail safes and shut-offs. It's not like once it goes into the stormwater system, like what happened on 290, that it's just going to pour into the lake. It's a whole self-contained system that's controlled. Which
we only have 2 minutes, but I have to bring this up. I read a very alarming letter to the editor in The Advocate this week, where someone was very upset with you in the contract with Wheeler Brader or whatever over the ash landfill. That, first of all, the contract and everything about it originates back before I was a selectman, which was 1986. So I think it was 83 or 84 when the contracts were originally written. It also went through Mr. Carney, Mr. Morgado, before it got to Mr. Mizuka. So it's had the oversight of 3 outstanding town managers. And what concerned me was that someone would think that there's not protection in place, first of all, to protect anything from leaching out beyond. Go ahead.
All that stormwater that hits that site and those cells where there's ash goes into the sewer system and gets treated at the sewer plant. So they're paying a big sewer bill for that, and it's all being treated. It doesn't just flow off into the wetlands or anything else like that. And I know people are surprised that ash is coming in from Saugus. Since 1992, ash from the entire region has been allowed to go to that site.
And the town makes a substantial amount of money with that coming in.
Yeah.
So I just think people need to know the real facts on that because it's been a very responsibly done project, and on the backs of not just you as a town manager, but 2 before you, and it's been through many selectmen and select board members over the years. So I didn't have a guest, and I still have so many things that I want to talk about. So anyways, 54 articles for town meeting. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Town meeting members, do your homework. Thanks.